Sorry to keep you waiting.
Another last one.
You're having some nice waves.
Are those shared by the others?
Okay, let's call to order the
Recording
March
in
12th
progress.
Special meeting of the school committee to discuss the budget. As is the case with these budget meetings, there's no public comment for this evening, but for anyone who wishes to make a comment on the budget, there will be a public hearing on March 19th next week at 6:30. And that will be an opportunity for anyone to have public comment. All public comments will be accepted at that time. We do not have a student here tonight. Okay, apparently when we have 10 meetings in a week, it's tough to get a student for everyone. So with that, we will start with the pledge. There's no obligation to participate. For all those who are willing and able, please rise. My name is Chris. I'm a fifth grade student. I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag of the United States of America.
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. We have one item on the consent agenda. I know the meeting agenda says 2, but we only have the meeting minutes from our March 10th meeting. Would anyone like to discuss that item further? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Okay, moved by Emily. Second by Rajiv. Let's take a vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3 is absent. Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Yep. Oh, there he is. Yep. Ward 6. Ward 7 is vacant. Ward 8
Yes.
and Ward 9.
Yes.
Okay, that's 7, 0, and 1 absent, 1 vacant. All right, Dade, I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to start off with.
No, sir. Just wanted to remind the public that last meeting, which was on Monday, we did an overview of the budget as a whole, the superintendent's proposed budget to the school committee. And we are now going into individual department sector updates for a deeper dive into what each of those areas means and includes and does not include at this time. The school committee hears the superintendent's budget and then makes a budget recommendation of their own to move forward in the funding process. And so we are in meeting 2 of a many meeting cycle. So this evening, we will hear from secondary education and we will hear from special education and student services, also known as the Office of Student Services.
Okay, is there any comments that any of the members want to chime in with from a general perspective or follow-ups from last meeting before we go into our subject areas tonight? Okay.
One point of order just for the committee. we've been taking into consideration questions and adding them to presentations as we can. If we can't answer anything in the course of these presentations, we'll bring them back to you after the sector updates are completed, and we'll just go through them one by one, anything that hasn't been completed. And we will share all the questions publicly when we are concluded, so that the public can see the thorough vetting that the school committee has given the school budget.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, with that, why don't we move into our first department area, which is secondary education. And we have Dr. Jean Roundtree to lead that presentation.
Hey, good evening. It's always a pleasure to be here to talk with you about our fantastic schools. So I'm going to present information about the budget concerning secondary schools. And it's important to note that the budget process always begins with an analysis of enrollment. And then, of course, we make the necessary staffing and resource adjustments according to that. I'm going to start with talking about high schools because I want to spend a little bit more time going a little bit, taking a little bit of a deeper dive into the enrollment shifts and some of the ways we're going to respond at middle schools. So overall at the high schools, we are projecting a decline of 31 students for next school year. At Newton North, the enrollment is projected to decline by 46 students. And at Newton South, the enrollment is actually projected to increase by 15 students. Newton South is expecting a larger sophomore class next year of about 504 students. At middle school, overall, we're projecting a decline of 25 students across middle schools. We are projecting that Bigelow is going to increase by 25 students next year, and we're also projecting we are expecting we're projecting enrollment declines at Brown, Day, and Oak Hill. Brown by 17 students, Day by 12 students, and Oak Hill by 21 students. These changes are will necessitate reducing a team teacher FTE by 2.0 at both Brown and Day, which represents a half team. And I did kind of want to start at talking through what the projected enrollment changes at Day will mean in terms of class sizes. And so I'll start with Day. And so the reduction of a half team at the 8th grade means they'll go from 3.5 teams to 3 teams. And the impact that will have on class sizes is the average class size will go from 22.1 this year to 23.1. The other thing I'll just say about Day and about Brown is that, while we are projecting a modest decrease in enrollment, decreasing the FTE by 2 is really the capacity of decreasing by 50, the capacity for 50 students, even though we're only reducing by 17 at one school and 12 by the other, right? And so it's a disproportionate impact, on the school when you make these sort of reductions. At Brown, we will reduce the current budget includes a reduction of a half team for 8th grade, so going from 3 teams to 2.5 because the projected enrollment decline is the 8th grade level, and it will still have that same disproportionate impact. At Bigelow, we are expecting the enrollment is projected to increase. And so we are going to also increase the FTE for 8th grade, so they will have additional teachers there. The impact that it will have. So first off, I think this is going to be very helpful to add the additional capacity to Bigelow for a number of reasons. The increased enrollment. Also, Bigelow receives more Title I funds because of the proportion of student needs there. And the additional FTE will reduce the projected 8th grade class sizes from from 24.1 this past October to 18.1 with the additional half team, which will allow us to provide, more support to a student population, that I think will really benefit from the additional support. At Brown, again, losing the additional half team for the 8th grade will actually increase the average class size, and I want to make sure that that the school committee is aware of that. The average class size for 8th grade this year is 21, and reducing the half team will raise the average class size for 8th grade to 24. And so, again, anything that we're sharing tonight, we're going to continue to analyze student needs, including special education, and those changes may impact the way we allocate resources going forward. So this budget proposal, maintains a lot of the resources added last year to reduce class sizes at the high school level. Again, as I just explained, it adds 2.0 team teaching to Bigelow for Tier 1 instruction, and also maintains all the existing assessments, interventions, and data platforms and tools that teachers are using. So we're not recommending any decrease in this budget, currently in the secondary education budget, to any of the other resources that schools would benefit from. I will say, though, and I think that all of us that have been working in public education for the last 5 years, we consistently see rising student needs, particularly at the secondary level since the pandemic. And educators acknowledge that while we're making progress on a whole, student needs are higher than they were before the pandemic. And so I think one of the things we really need to reflect about is that the way that we've funded schools and the amount of resources that I think have allowed us to make the difference we want to make before the pandemic. I think that the cost of meeting these needs has gone up because needs have become more acute, and we really want to be responsive to that. So some of the things that we really feel are important to do, but right now we have not been able to do in this current budget. The first is to increase some of our MTSS resources. So our multi-tiered system of support, of course, the foundation is our Tier 1 instruction, the things that happen for every student, in every classroom every day. Our Tier 2 resources are for students that need additional support, which is, hopefully about 15% of kids, and our Tier 3 resources, which are our most significant supports. Many of those would be offered through special education referrals, or would represent about 5%. And so one of the things that our proposal does not do that I really do feel like it is necessary to do is to restore the FTE that we once had in middle schools for literacy and math specialists to provide interventions to students who need it at the middle school level. And so for us to restore these positions, we would need an additional 6.25 FTE that is not currently in our budget. And so I think that I want to start with this because, we've talked about reducing the team teaching size at both Day and Brown. I think that, the more effectively we're able to offer our Tier 1 instruction resources, that means that we'll have less students that need Tier 2 supports, and we've got less students that need Tier 3 supports. I think reducing these, reducing the teacher team sizes, it's hard for us to predict and anticipate what impacts, that will have. But, we do know that means that those teams will have less. I think, given the class sizes for 8th grade, and speaking with the teams at Brown and Day, I did want to provide some context to some of the things they are strategically planning for next year. At Brown, for next year, the incoming 6th grade class, the class size is consistent with the class this year. But what is different is they are anticipating a higher proportion of students receiving special education support on IEPs. And so this year, 30 out of the 226 6th graders at Brown benefited from IEPs. Next year, they're projecting over 50 out of the 232 students that we are projecting to attend will be on IEPs. And so that means that with a teaching team the same size, that their planning resources, teacher attention, small group instruction will be spread more thinly. And the Brown team would be hopeful that if we did reduce the 8th grade team size, we would be able to reallocate teachers to support what they strategically support what they know is a 6th grade class that would benefit from additional resources. At Day, they're going to be moving from 3.5 teams to 3. They have a 6th grade where they've been working very hard to support this year, and they have, expressed a real desire to reallocate, teacher resources to next year's 7th grade so they can continue to meet the needs that they have, begun to address this year. I think another thing that this budget does not do is it doesn't give us the opportunity to pair the work we've been doing with our middle school MTSS this year with additional training and partner resources that would be really beneficial, and particularly at Day. I do believe that they would benefit from training for teachers, administrators, and counselors about how to align the MTSS structures within their school. It would be really great if we could provide that those resources, and that is not currently in our budget. Another thing that our budget does not do that I touched upon in my entry plan presentation on December 2nd is it does not add additional school adjustment counselors at the high school level. We have seen an increase in the number of students that have acute needs that would be addressed through counseling, and our current system is that students who are not able to access some of the counseling resources actually end up accessing them later through referrals to special education. If we had more school adjustment counselors, we could meet more of those needs at Tier 1 and Tier 2, and we would hopefully see a reduction in the number of students who are referred for special education, largely to get access to counseling services. The other thing that I want to say that I meant to mention, thinking about the literacy and math specialists at Day and Brown. Right now, each school has a 0.5 literacy interventionist. In past years, they had a 1.0 literacy and a 1.0 math. And I wanted everyone to understand what that means in terms of the way services are actually delivered. So at Brown, that means that students who would benefit from literacy intervention services, they receive those from the 0.5 FTE that they have for 1/3 of the year. So the interventionist devotes 1/3 of the year to 6th grade, 1/3 of the year to 7th grade, and 1/3 of the year to 8th grade, which is an equitable way to use the resource. But I think we would agree that our preference would be that all students that need literacy intervention would get them for the entire year. At Day, they also have the same 0.5 literacy specialist that provides intervention service. What they do is they've had that person devote all of their time to the 6th grade, which is 1/3 of the school, but that has been the way that they have strategically moved to support the needs that are in front of them. And if we are able to restore these FTE, I think we'll be able to more effectively run the MTSS system, so that students who are identified through formative assessments, and our STAR literacy and math assessments, can get targeted intervention during their intervention blocks and extension blocks. Right now at the middle school, many of the times that students have for intervention, the intervention is provided by the teacher that is available schedule-wise. So for instance, if you're someone who's, your assessment results indicate that you would benefit from additional support in math, you may be getting that support from someone who teaches history, but they have, but that is their free block, right? And so we want to move to a system where we can be as strategic as possible with all of our with the way that we use all of our resources. And so our current budget does not address these things under the umbrella of multi-tiered systems of support. The current budget proposal also does not add some things to some of the additional programming that we all understand to be very important. And so it does not add any additional FTE to support our career and technical education programs. We have identified, 3 areas where we wanted to expand career and technical offerings. There's very, very high demand and high interest from students in these programs. Right now, we are not able to give all students that are requesting to be part of career and technical education offerings, that opportunity. And our budget does not give us the opportunity to expand it. And I'll just give you a sense of some of the things that we had planned that we've not yet been able to do. And so most of our district career and technical education and Chapter 74 programs are located at North, although we do have some programs at South, and students from both schools participate in them. Again, there's very high interest. And at North alone, I'll give examples from specific schools. There were 85 students who were not able to access their preferred major this year because we don't have the resources to accommodate it. We are also very interested in creating more equitable opportunities for students at North and South. The fact that the programs are housed at North means that students from South, in order to access them, have to travel during the school day, and often will lose an instructional block going from South to North and back. We're fortunate that in many cases we're able to bus some students, other students, get dropped off. And so the expansion of career and technical education programs that we are planning would add more programs, at the South Campus, which would enable students who are interested in those particular programs to access them more easily. We've had a number of conversations about the process that we would need to go through in order to create the exploratory programs for dental assisting, medical assisting, and information technology. We would need to add some FTE in the first year, and also contribute some resources to outfit the classroom so that we would be able to get the exploratory started. At that point, we could also access state grants for the expansion of programs, but they do require you to have already started your exploratory program and already made initial investments in some of the classrooms or shops that will be housing the projects, the program, sorry. We're going to continue this work, even though that our current budget does not include the additional FTE for those programs. We are going to continue our planning work. We are going on Friday, March 21st, to Boston to visit programs at EMK and at Madison Park, so that we are going to continue to be as prepared as possible, so that we can, when we do have the resources, that we can start the programs. And another piece of additional programming, that the budget does not include, it would be additional FTE for humanities instruction, which would reduce class sizes in those areas. So I'll just give you a couple examples of class sizes at the high school level, and that our current budget does not currently address. So at Newton South, there are 18 sections that are of courses of all subject areas that have 28 students or more in them. 11 of those are history courses, and so this is an area where if we were able to add history or FTE for humanities, we would be able to reduce class sizes, and the majority of their really, really large classes are in humanities. 6 of the classes that are the sections of 28 or higher are also math classes. And I know that in this group, we've had lots of conversations about math instruction. And so, continuing to make progress with reducing class sizes by creating positions and opportunities at the high school level would be very important. At Newton North, 57% of their history sections have 25 or more students, and so that this, if we were able to add additional humanities teachers, we would be able to reduce class sizes at both high schools. Also, it would allow us to offer more students full schedules. I'll just give you an example at North, with their current distribution of teacher FTE. They have a number of students who don't have full schedules, and so they consider taking 84 credits to be a full schedule. Right now, of the 2,100 students at Newton North, 505 of them either are at or above the minimum. We've got 410 of the students are actually taking exactly 72 credits, and we've got 185 students that are below the 72 credits, which we feel constitutes being under-enrolled. And so having the additional teaching FTE, or, and also I think as part of this process, always evaluating the way that FTE is distributed would allow us to reduce class sizes there. And so I know that with our less than level service budget, the secondary education currently has a deficit of $801,817. That's equivalent to about 8.0 FTE for teaching positions. And so, we would need, without any adjustments to the budget, we would need to find ways to flatten that out. Which mean we would have to, look at making adjustments to things. I think we would all prefer, not to make adjustments. I think we would have to look at support positions, that we have in the schools. I think we would probably have to, reconsider some of the ways we are allocating funds in athletics and extracurriculars. And, what we would consider, at the middle school level, like specialist opportunities. And it would require us, I think, to have difficult conversations about things that we would, much rather continue to provide for our students and for our teachers. And so, that is the close of what I was going to present. I'm happy to have a discussion and answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Dr. Nolan?
I just wanted to add one piece of color, just so, just to reference everyone with the anniversary of our COVID time period. I just wanted to remind everyone that COVID, in terms of COVID kids, our current fifth graders started kindergarten and did grades K1, 2 during COVID. Our current sixth graders, so our next year's sixth graders, grades 1, 2, 3. And seventh graders, grades 2, 3, 4, and eighth graders, grades 3, 4, 5. So we are in that very unique time period in our middle schools and rising to high school of a learner we never had before with an experience they never had before. So I just wanted to share that. And certainly the Brown story that you heard here tonight demonstrates what we've been trying to say about not having adequate MTSS in the Tier 1 system may be resulting in higher special education referrals and program needs and IEPs for those students. To go from 30 students in a grade level to 50 is quite significant a change. So I just wanted to share that with you. And also just wanted to remind everyone that CTE courses, our career technical courses, can also be taken by students who are not enrolled in majors there. And indeed, many do. And that may help us address that full schedule issue, in addition to giving students credentials and workplace experience that they can use right away when they are out in the workforce. And so with 185 potentially under-enrolled students, the CTE classes, specialists, all of those pieces help us to address that issue. And that CTE high schools are significantly more expensive to run than general education comprehensive high schools because of the amount of equipment and training and the expertise that's needed. And we have one embedded within our school system. So I just think that's an often undersung and understood part of our community and a real gem. So I just wanted to make those two pieces known.
Okay, thank you. Questions from members? Paul, and then Tamika.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Anna, for making those last 2 points. I'm going to take that as a lead-in to a broader question. Chris, I know we're focused on this year's budget in this presentation, but in the discussion we've had, we've also been very careful to look ahead at future costs and future benefits of what we're doing. And I know Mayor Fuller has raised a number of concerns, as have other people, about the use of so-called one-time money for ongoing purposes. What I'd like to explore with Jean and Anna now, if you don't mind, and if Aisha were there, I'd have her pitch in. But I think both of you have made a very persuasive and cogent case that intervention, that the MTSS intervention has not only a short-term beneficial effect, but that it also has a long-term beneficial effect in terms of reducing the number of children who move on to special education, which, as we know, is qualitatively more expensive than general education per student. And what I'd like to explore is whether we can colorably make a case that current investments, and let's just call them one-time investments, for example, to deal with the COVID cohort that you just talked about, that there's a colorable case to make that one-time investments in MTSS, particularly for that cohort, have the potential to bend the long-term cost curve of ongoing expenses in the school system. And if what I'm wondering is there a way to document or quantify those longer term cost reductions compared to the base case without the MTSS supports as further support for use of one-time funds for MTSS activities? Was that a clear question? If not, I'll try to clear it up more. But I'm looking for a way to bridge this gap between a concern about using one-time funds for ongoing expenses and instead looking at one-time funds as an investment that can help reduce long-term expenses compared to what would otherwise be the case.
Well, I'm going to give it a shot, and then I'm going to let Jean chime in. This is exactly what Barry was saying to us, I think 3 meetings ago, just to give Barry credit.
Yeah, I will let you go because you are the expert, so I'm not going to speak to something that you can. But I just wanted to just put the two together. Was this for me is the same thing in terms of special education and identifying kids early. And it's if I understand it correctly, Dr. Nolan, it's the intersection of do they go to special education or do they go to MTSS? And if in general, the point that I understand is it's early intervention, and early intervention then leads to a whole host of other things. The problem that I have is, as much as I have looked into it, I don't know that it's quantifiable in that I've read data that suggests that it leads later in life to making more money, having more opportunity. I mean, you can go down the list, and then it also is less dependent on city resources in general, mental health resources, police resources, you can add to that. So it's a lot of things, but it starts with that early part.
I would say it is hard to quantify. And if we had a longer set of benchmark assessments, we would be able to say, what was the impact of COVID? What interventions did we have then or before COVID that made a difference versus now? Here's what we know this year that we didn't know a year ago. And that is with the implementation of the benchmark assessments and the district data meetings, we do know who is not making a year's worth of progress. And we know who is making more than a year of progress, right? So remember when I told you I interviewed bright spot teachers across the district? Those teachers were getting better than a year's worth of progress from their students, and we've been trying to replicate those practices. So to the question, though, Paul, of can short-term deployments assist in this process, the answer is absolutely. The problem is that schools then become used to having those resources, and we want them. And in order to build the kind of trust that parents need long-term to say, this is a thing that the Newton Public Schools always do, we cannot guarantee that right now, right? So if we're saying this is a temporary scenario, A, we will not attract people who want to do those jobs because they'll think it's temporary. So we will get people to do it, but how long they'll stay with us, that's another matter. And second, I don't want to say, well, you're going to get it this year, so stick with us this year, and next year we won't have that same scenario. So I think the mayor's right to be worried about that because we can't sustain it long term. That said, more intensive intervention for students anytime is better. So the model that Jean told you about where kids are getting 1/3 of the year of intervention, the best practice recommendation for a tier 1 first round intervention is 6 weeks of intervention, check, and then 6 more weeks. And then if that's not enough, extend the time that the student gets it. So double dose for 6 weeks before you're even recommending to a special education team that we might need to do additional looks at the child. So yes, more intensive supports would always yield something. And at least we have our benchmark assessments right now to be able to tell us if it's working.
Can I just respond, Chris?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Okay, then let me modify my case statement. Instead of making it a choice between, a rationale for using one-time funds, it seems to me, Anna, that you're suggesting that it's a rationale for long-term use of funds for those MTSS purposes, also as a way of bending the long-term cost curve for the system as a whole, because over time you reduce the number of children who have to go into the more expensive special ed program. Is it fair to say that?
Oh, that is why you do it. Yes.
So, I mean, if we were running a factory, which we're not, I'm not suggesting in any way we are, and we were considering an investment in a new industrial process that lowered our overall cost of goods in the marketplace, we would look at it as a kind of return on investment. And I think what you're saying very directly, that we at Newton Public Schools could also look upon the MTSS expenditures as a wise investment in terms of the future costs or the likely future costs of our system. And since, Chris, we are looking at more than just 1 year, and we're looking at how to make our system sustainable, both academically and financially in the future, I think that's a consideration we want to keep in mind as we make those nitty-gritty decisions over the next 2 weeks about what to preserve, shrink, and expand in the MTSS budget items. Thank you.
And so, Paul, just so you are aware, this has been an ongoing discussion with the city administration, with city council. When we sit down with them and we talk budget, this is consistently brought forward as one of the things that can, bend the curve, to use your phrase, and put us in a sustainable position over the longer term, that this is an investment. I think you were thinking about it more correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's less of a one-time investment, more of an ongoing investment, but then that creates a shift of costs from, hopefully spending on special education right now into tier 1, tier 2 intervention in a non-special education setting. And that's a just more efficient process. It's better for the student that they're getting this intervention in a more real time. We have those discussions. We have no way of quantifying it, I think. I mean, we've knocked this around quite a bit of how do we think about that, to use your factory analogy, how do we think about that IRR on that investment? Intuitively, the belief is, yes, this is a NPV positive investment. The problem is we don't have a source of capital. If we were running our factory, we could go, we could go, we could go borrow money, and the return on that investment is more than we're paying on that debt, and we just don't have that ability.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I just want Jean to be able to weigh in. And I also want to say, teachers out there, the factory model is not how we're thinking about this. Like, it's a metaphor. And I just want to, sometimes that makes teachers just like, because we're not making widgets here. Growing human.
I'm hoping I made that clear.
You did, Paul, but I'm just going to amplify it just in case someone just tuned in and didn't hear you say that.
Okay.
Just responding to Paul.
So I really appreciate this conversation, and Paul, I appreciated the point that you made. My grandmother was MECO coordinator in Hingham for 43 years, and one of the things that she always said to me was, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of care, right? And I feel like that's the conversation that we're having. I think the more that we're able to strategically invest, on the front end, means that we will have hopefully lower needs downstream. And I wanted just to make two very brief points. Number one, when it comes to the intervention or the math and literacy specialist positions, at one point we had a 1.0 FTE in all of the middle schools for both math and literacy. So really what we're talking about is, restoring things that we had before the pandemic. And so if we feel like kids need, more support than they did, since the pandemic, part of it was because some supports didn't come back when the kids did, right? And the math and literacy interventionists are supports that were there and are not deployed at the same levels, which is why if we feel like the kids don't have the same level of support, it's because they don't. I think that I would hope that we would, be able to configure things in some way to get closer to that. The second brief point I wanted to make, is there's some connectivity to other conversations that we're having, and so it is my theory that if we are able to capitalize on the growth and improvement of our ability to do common assessments using the STAR platform, and we're currently using iReady, but we're transitioning to STAR for both literacy and math, to use that real-time data that we have and then act on it. I think over time we're going to have students that are more prepared at the high school level to take on more the higher level classes that we offer. And so I do think that this does connect to the conversations that we've been having about math instruction, and the way that we approach leveled and multi-leveled instruction. I think that if we are able to make these investments, we will see kids better prepared to access opportunity at the high school level. And we will also, with the data systems that Dr. Nolan mentioned, and that Maria Colby and Gina Flanagan and so many of our team members have invested so much time, energy, and expertise in developing, they'll pay dividends.
I just also want to reach out to conversations that we've had about curriculum. So a story from Countryside this morning. So visiting Countryside, there are a continuum of special education services being delivered there. And it was a really nice thing to see today that the very same literacy curriculum being delivered in our general education classrooms with modifications and adaptations was also being done in our sub-separate programs. And I say this to you also because that goes hand in hand with a strong MTSS system. If tier 1 is tier 1 for everyone, and what we do is we implement the supports and structures for all those young people. Students who may be special education have more access to general education when they're ready to do so. And it's not literacy for those kids and then literacy over here. This is the program we deliver. And I also say that because I always worry that our teachers are hearing like we're aligning the curriculum and no one will have any choice and no one will have voice. We will. And we get all these side benefits that we really need to accelerate the growth and the remediation of these learning gaps for our most vulnerable students. I do want to offer that our MTSS director and I have been chatting. Barry asked us a bunch of really good questions, which we've been chewing on, and we'll bring you the answers back. And it's about how do we measure that impact? So similar to what Paul just asked. And she has offered that we could do an impact of the 5 intervention teachers that we deployed last year with the use of these funds that you gave us, Mayor Fuller, in order to address class sizes and elementary MTSS needs. So why don't we bring that back to you so that we can at least look at a 1 year. We won't necessarily have all the curriculum underneath us that we need, but it could give you some information about the impact of those teachers that this last year of the budget impacted. Spoiler alert, we may not be able to tell, but I will bring it to you because I want you to have confidence in us, and I want to see how far we were able to take it this year.
Just one more point, Chris, if I may.
Go ahead, Paul.
In addition to everything you've said, Anna and Jean, if we go back to another thing that we're trying to accomplish of reducing the achievement gap, for example, of the Black kids in schools compared to the average, I think the one thing that was demonstrated by Orla at Ainger when she was doing MTSS before it was being done system-wide was that it was, I think, the most effective tool in reducing that achievement gap. So in addition to all the other things we've been talking about, there was actually a real improvement in the achievement of kids who traditionally would not have done as well because of the early intervention.
Thanks, Paul. Tamika, and then Barry, did you still have a question? I saw your yellow Simpsons hand up. No?
No, I'm good. I just wanted to make sure I could add to what Paul was saying, but I'm good.
Okay. So Tamika, then Rajiv.
Thank you. And thank you, Jean, for your work putting together your recommendations on this budget. I guess I want to back up and just offer a comment and a peek at the way my brain works, which, warning.
Taking notes.
Yeah. For me, the marriage between some of the concerns that Paul raised and Chris's comments and some of the things that we as a committee struggle with around how to fund worthy initiatives. It would be assisted if we had that timeline, doing what things in what order at what point in time. Because I think there's a general understanding that we're not going to be able to do all the things all at once. That's not reasonable. What is reasonable and what would certainly give us a good sense of where we're going and how long it's going to take us to get there to those optimal peak levels of what makes this school awesome and thriving is an understanding of what things come in that cycle. And that would also inform the investments that we need at strategic points in time. And so I think the model for that for me is the model that Gina has created. I love the way that is just laid out. Year 1, we need to do this. Year 2, we're doing that. By year 3, we've got 1 and 2 done. And guess what? We're working on item number 4 or 3. I lost track. My brain is scary, like I said. So I would say that I don't know if that's going to be helpful in this, but when I look at the list of things that this budget doesn't support, not because you don't want them to, but because we don't have the resources right now, I'm thinking in terms of what's your number one add back or add in if funds were not not a barrier. And I'm guessing, because it's first on the list, that it might be the interventionists that we were just talking about and the supports for MTSS. So I think for me, it would be helpful and wise to put a, we want to get it done by whatever year it is. And that's the thing that we're all collectively working towards. So that's one point. My second is.
Can I just give you what you
Go ahead.
want? So that is the point of the strategic planning
Yeah.
scenario. So I too feel like I want to give you the long range. So the Gina long-term model would be one. We would have that for MTSS. We would have it for all the parts, operations. We would have sustainability, all the things that our community has identified. So we'll bring you the shell, and then this administrative team will then break that out over a 3 or 5 year look.
Great. And obviously, there's a shared understanding that we may not be able to move on all the things.
Yep.
In the timelines that are articulated, but it just gives us that general guideline of where we want to go and how
Yeah.
we're intending to get there.
Agree.
So I love that. Bigelow, I see that their numbers are going up
Mhm.
and that Day's numbers are going down, which is part of the strategy that was devised a few
Mhm.
years ago when Cabot School, we had a very long and lengthy process as to how to decrease Day's
Mhm.
very ballooning size and how to shrink decrease Day, increase Bigelow. And so I guess my point around that is, are we seeing a realization of that? It seems in the short term that we are. Are we on track to make sure that Bigelow keeps expanding and now they've got the support of the additional staff from this budget?
Mm.
Is that something you're seeing continue or?
Yes. So we have the projected increase in enrollment of 25 this year. That will continue next year, and I think it'll be even more than 25. I don't have the number top of mind. I could look at the arrays and give you that number. So yes, it is having that impact. And I also just want to shout out Dan Green and the team at Bigelow that Dan's just started and he's really hit the ground running, and so it's a combination of the shifts with the assignment of students from Cabot. I would also say that they're continuing to build on the proud legacy of the Bigelow Bulldogs. And then I would say it's those two things.
So the other thing I was wondering about when I was looking over your presentation, the CTE staffing.
Mhm.
Do you have a sense, or can you give us a sense of the levels that it would take to operationalize those programs?
Yes. So we've been meeting, we had a meeting in December where we kind of organized, the amount of FTE. I believe the number that we said we needed for the exploratories for next year, I think was 0.8 total. Because essentially it would just be one course for each of the CTE programs, plus also some planning time. So we really would just need kind of one section's worth of time for the exploratory, and kids would rotate through it. And then, some of the FTE would also kind of cover the planning that would go with it. So I believe, if my memory serves, that the total amount of FTE that we were looking for 1 year to get the exploratory started was actually less than one. I mean, again, what that would mean would be, identifying, a teacher who could take that as part of, their overall, course load. Because again, I think when, for the requirements of the state, to get started is just the one section for exploratory, but it's also then the challenge is finding, a way to make it possible for for only one course worth of FTE, which would be part of the puzzle. I think that probably, if we were to talk to a lot of our partner districts, they probably, look for at least a half-time position, right? So they could bring someone in to do that. But I think if the question was, what is the bare minimum? I think we established the bare minimum, I think was 0.25 per area.
Said at that point, you'd be in a position to get grant funding.
Yes.
To support.
Yes, because the state does require you to make an initial investment, and to meet certain progress benchmarks before they will, before you can access some of the grant funds.
Mhm.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Tamika. Rajiv?
Thank you, Gene. Two what I hope are, again, fairly quick questions. Do we have a sense of how many school adjustment counselors we need?
So I think the answer to that question would depend on who you ask. You know, and the reason, and I'll just give you a sense of some of the conversations I have that you know that kind of inform that as a priority. And so I met as part of my entry plan, you know, I was able to interview counselors and department heads at both North and South. I was able to spend time with two of the folks that are very involved in counseling services at North, in addition to the department head. And I think if we were able to add 2 adjustment counselors at each school, I think that would make a significant difference. But 1 at each school would make a significant difference. The current counselor student ratios at South, for example, they're over 180. And so I think that anything we can do to reduce the number of students on a counselor's caseload, I think then will increase the depth at which they can work, the number of interactions they're able to have with students. And one of the things I'd say, one of the most powerful things I observed is some of the support we have in place for the Signs of Suicide program, where students do a class, they do they self-report their thoughts, feelings, and ideas on a screener, and then those screeners are then reviewed by the counseling team, who then identifies students that may need additional support. And being able to add capacity right in that process, I think would make a huge difference. All 4 of the folks involved in counseling that I've spoken to at the 2 high schools, have said that they have a backlog of students who would benefit from initial counseling services that are not they're not part of their IEPs, and because they can't get those because of the ratios, they then do referrals and end up accessing it through special education. So that was a very long answer to your question. I would say if we were able to increase by 1, it would make a difference. But through the conversations I had, it felt like if we were able to increase by 2, that was the sort of measurable impact that I thought would be appropriate.
Do you happen to remember what the ratio looks like at North?
Not off the top of my head, but I can get back to you with that.
This one. And then one other, again, hopefully quick question, around the potential for exploring new CTE programs. Mm-hmm. Just a couple of years ago, we shut down a CTE program for multiple reasons, but one of the reasons given was a reduction in student interest in that program. So in terms of the dental assisting, medical assisting, and IT, I'm not sure what ISSN stands for.
It's like networking. So it's
Networking,
information technology.
Do we have a good sense of demand and whether it'll be sustained demand and so on?
Yeah. So as part of making the determination that those would be programs that we would target, part of it was assessing student demand and student interest. Part of it was looking at trends for CTE programs across the state. And the last piece is thinking about what the fields look like for employment after secondary or post-secondary education. And so those are fields, particularly in our state, where there's a lot of opportunity for employment. And so, those are I would say those are the 3, big areas we looked at before determining those programs. Another thing that we considered is just based on our physical plant, what programs would be likely to be most successful. I mean, for instance, I know for a fact, I talked about the number of students that aren't able to get into their major 1 program through the CTE programs, and just talking about students at North who are looking to enroll. There are also hundreds of kids that don't get into their second or third choice also, right? One of the things, like automotive is hugely popular, but comparatively the size of the auto bay is smaller than you'll see at a lot of high schools. And that was, I did ask, about, when the building was designed and built, I was saying, well, why wasn't the auto area bigger? And that's because whenever you're doing anything, there's only a certain amount of space. And so I think, compromises were made. But I think, some of our programs are not as large as would be ideal, just and have been, I think, since the origin point. And the challenge is you can't really grow an auto, the auto vocation without adding to the physical space. And the Newton North campus is maxed out. And so we have to look at what are the programs, based on our available space that we could start in both medical. So all three, medical, dental, and networking, really require a classroom. Of all of those, dental has the biggest upfront cost because you have to get equipment and you also have to install the chairs in the classroom. But really all you need is a classroom. And so those were things that we considered.
Thank you. That's helpful. And yes, I've seen firsthand that the challenge with getting into the classes, including culinary arts and other things. I think the one other thing I would mention, and you may have looked at this already, is for some of these programs, I wouldn't say it's a competition, but there are community colleges that are kind of filling those needs in terms of the training. It would be nice to find some white space where, it would benefit our students and we're doing something that isn't generally available more broadly. But thank you, this was helpful.
I do want to say, Mr. Chair, just one side benefit of doing the information systems and technology is if those kids become certified, we can put them to work here in the school for their internships. So that saves us money in another way. So just as our preschool training program at South does that right now.
Thank you. Emily?
This will be really quick because Rajiv actually asked many of my questions about CTE and space, and there will never be a time where I will say, no, I don't think we need more counselors at the high schools ever. So I'm happy that there's, some focus on that. Tamika, you laugh. I always ask every year during budget session, what is the ratio for guidance? And so it sounds like it's been kind of static. Maybe, I don't know if that's the case over the last couple of years in terms of what caseloads have been, but I feel like it's been around the 180, possibly slightly higher, 185.
It's also higher at Oak Hill. They have, of the middle schools, they have the highest ratio.
I'm talking about South.
Yeah.
I actually don't, I don't know as many of the ratio numbers for the counselor. I'd be very interested in learning more about that.
Okay.
That would be great. And then also just a pitch for some more CTE stuff at North and South. We said it's the problem for kids to go back and forth. They lose a block. And so it'd be great for us to expand more into South, assuming that there's space, which I know is a big issue. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks,
Emily, sorry, I remember ratios in the range of 180 to 200 pretty consistently for the last 3 years. Right. So I don't think we've made much headway in bringing those down.
Good news is Office of Student Services is next, and I bet she can answer those questions.
Thank you. Sorry.
Just a couple quick questions. So Newton North declining by 46 students. I know for like planning purposes, we tend to think of the staffing as a little more linear than at the elementary school where, you have 15 different schools and, all the different grade levels to deal with. Can you just talk a little bit about the decline in 46 students that's not leading to any staff declines? Is that alleviating class sizes? What's the impact there?
If you give me a second to look at the report, I can maybe answer that, but I would need a second to look at it.
May I fill the airtime?
You may.
So I just heard from our MTSS director. She just texted me. We'll have that 5 intervention teacher analysis for you Monday so that we can see what has happened with those caseloads.
Okay, yeah, that'd be interesting case study to see. And this is something we can come back to too.
Yeah.
If
I would appreciate the opportunity to.
We can come back to you with that. We'll make
That
a
is-
note. It'll be on Monday
Totally fine.
or a subsequent meeting if
Yep.
you would prefer to
Nope,
punt it.
that's fine.
Okay.
We can discuss that
Right, and the
Monday.
specific question is, with a reduction of 46 students, what commensurate reduction has occurred in staffing? Or could there be?
Yeah, well, I guess the question is, could there be, again, we think of that as a little bit more of a linear function. And, I don't know if that's because of the distribution of the reduction in students between grades and,
Yep.
that type of thing, or if it's strategically alleviating another pressure point.
Yep.
Which I know we certainly have. Class size has obviously been a focus over the last 2 years.
And what about is, I think, number one, look at the enrollment projections by grade level, then also by program area.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And so in order to really thoroughly answer the question, I can get back to you on it.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure I heard the numbers correctly here. It was in our high school, something like 180 students were under enrolled.
So at North,
it was-
it was 185 students had less than 72 credits,
185 just at North.
just at North.
Okay, but the same problem isn't persisting, isn't existing at South?
It doesn't look the same at South. And so what I did was, I wanted to provide, an example, for the points I was making from, from each of the schools, to make sure that the picture I was representing, was inclusive. I felt that, from reviewing it, the points about North were more straightforward. So, that was my focus. I can do the commensurate, deep dive, at South, but I wanted to make sure what I presented was balanced. And I got the feedback that from my entry plan presentation, which was pretty long, that we would that I would want to make my points efficiently. But I can, but I know that I can also get you that information in a short turnaround.
Perfect. And we appreciate the conciseness of your presentation. But that's a big number. That's almost 10% of the student population. I am surprised to hear it, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of, thinking through, what are the classes that kids want? What are the classes that kids need? How are we deploying the resources that we currently have? I think that always has to be part of, any conversation that we have. I think, and again, I think the connection point to, the work we're able to do in the middle schools to really have the most prepared, ninth graders possible also impacts, right, the type of courses that we would need to provide in order for kids to have full schedules.
Okay. Just as one follow-up, I'd be interested to see there, which I don't expect you to have this, maybe what is that under enrollment by grade level? And then the last question I have for you is, on CTE, and you were talking about having the 0.25 for each of the 3 fields as the sort of proof of concept there. And then the grant funding you mentioned, can you just kind of go into a little more depth there as to the magnitude of that, and what would that investment of 0.25 times 3 look like? What would that yield in terms of the leverage that we'd have from grant funding?
So it would be in combination with making sure that the dental assisting, medical assisting, and networking classes were also outfitted with the materials they needed for the exploratory. So we met about this in December, and I meet with Kathleen Duff, who leads our career and technical education programming. I know that we have the numbers on our agenda, so I can either look quickly now or get back to you.
I can give you an example. How about that? Yeah. So the Capital Skills Grant is a state grant but it's a chicken and an egg kind of thing. You have to front the money for the teachers before they'll front the money for the actual stuff. Mm-hmm. So I went to Keefe Tech High School to go and speak with the superintendent there, and I toured the dental bays. So they had 12 bays. It was $1 million to put that in place, but that was through the capital skills grant. And then, of course, there are reimbursements through the state for the programming to sustain it thereafter. And that's more like the FTE costs and things like that. So that's one shop. Information systems technology doesn't require anything but hardware and broken things for people to fix and, learning
Lots of
things
those.
like learning things. I mean, Stephen could probably tell you, more what that even looks like, certification programs and the like Apple certification or C++ or whatever the new, the newest and latest and greatest is. So those are just examples. I'm less up on the medical assisting, but it's definitely not dental worthy amounts of money. It's somewhere in the middle range, but you can write grants, but it requires you to have proven that you have the interest and you will put the staffing towards it before they'll give it.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, I guess I'm just something I think maybe we should think about more. I mean, obviously, anytime you can, leverage something with grant funding and it's I assume there's
We have
Probably-
we have a couple things in the works for
probably
this.
reasonable stability there from a grant funding perspective, given that this is fulfilling a need in the Commonwealth. I mean, this is, these are where jobs are. This is what
The-
employers
The
are
governor
looking for.
just put out a redesigning and reimagining high school initiative, so I believe she's saying those things. I just think we're all in a holding pattern on
Right.
grants in general.
Understood. Okay. That's all I have. Oh, Mayor Fuller, and then Paul, if you have a follow-up.
Can I just
Yeah.
build on the question that Chris asked about the under-enrolled students at Newton North? Directionally, we have 185 students who should be taking one more class. So that's, if there's 25 kids in a classroom, roughly, we need 8 more classrooms being run daily. So that's roughly 2 more teachers. If each teacher teaches 4 classes,
I think it's,
I would check on that.
directionally.
yeah, I have to. I have
It
to
might
check
be
on that.
3, 2 or 3, but that wasn't on your list of asks.
I realize that, that we are, that we have a limited budget. And so I think one of the things that and the way we've approached it is really identifying all the needs. We went to all the schools, and I think in the Thrive budget, I think we included all of the, all of the things that would, make a difference for schools. And I think that given, that we are having a conversation about, having a level service budget, I have just prioritized the things that I felt like were the most urgent. But I do think, depending on, we would have to, meet with the teams at North to just, again, pinpoint the grade levels. I'm sure it's juniors and seniors. And then also just look at what are the specific areas where kids are requesting courses that they're requesting that, where we don't have capacity. I would say that our CTE programs, I would say, would be a pretty big, area that we can look at, because I do know that some of the things that kids might do also are part of career and technical education. And for the kids that don't get into their, their majors, I know that requires them to, make shifts that were different than the classes that they hope to take. But again, I think that it would be, we're not talking, I think, a very large number of teachers, to make a difference. I think if we had, 2 or 3 teachers, I think we could significantly decrease that, but we would need to know what would be the courses that would make the biggest difference. And I think it would probably be math and history, because if we had those courses, we're able to bring down class sizes, and some of that could be, if we're able to accommodate the same, the same number of students over a larger number of classrooms, we might be able to free up, periods for teachers to offer, additional electives just by adding to the areas that we know that we have high class sizes.
I did ask this question early when I got here, and the number was quite high at that time. But we've added classes to both high schools last year. We've added teachers. That has helped to address it. So I think we've made a difference in it, but it is concerning.
Is it traditional to have 10% of your students under-enrolled?
It's just, we have a different schedule and a different credit system here, so that in theory, you could finish all the high school credits in 3 years here. So this is the issue, is that so when you hear from parents that students aren't having classes, some of it's that they don't want the elective they were offered, so they choose not to take it. So I would want to just double check.
Okay.
Is it really an no option? Is it an option you didn't want?
And
Or some other thing I haven't thought of? And I want to just be
Thank you.
careful. You know, I know a lot of our high school staff listen. I think we should poll our principals and just to get a accurate count, but it's lower than it was when we
love
started
to hear
this.
more when you
Mhm.
investigate it a bit more. Thanks.
Okay, Paul, you had a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Chris. First, though, I just want to say, Jean, I just want to say how impressed I am with how quickly you've come up to speed with regard to your domain and in terms of the substance and the issues and your facility with the facts and figures. So nicely done. I just wanted to follow up on the enrollment thing with a particular ask, which is, if I remember correctly, and I may not be remembering correctly, when the Educational Stabilization Fund was created and we created the additional teaching positions to reduce the class sizes in the STEM areas, I think at the time there was a belief that because of declining enrollment in the schools over the next 3 or 4 years, that those positions would not all be needed for an extended period of time. But I may remember that wrong. But if you could just take a look at that again while you're putting together all these enrollment answers, I would appreciate it, because to me, again, that supported the use of, to the extent that it was going to be temporary, it supported the use of one-time funds for that purpose. Not that the purpose wasn't warranted in any event, but it might help resolve some concerns about the budget going forward. So thank you.
Go ahead.
Just to help with that recollection, Paul, I think what we had indicated was we knew the bubble was rising through the high school of higher class sizes and that enrollment would be dropping at the elementary. So indeed, the 10 positions that you're seeing right now being reduced from elementary, the plan was to put them in other parts of the organization for a time-bound period and then phase out if the overall enrollment of the district continued to drop. So our safety net to remove that additional temporarily funded set of positions goes away if we make that cut this year to those classes. So I can't replace them with already ongoing operating budget positions if we have to make those further reductions.
Thanks. I think that helps explain it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Dr. Roundtree? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Office of Student Services. And Casey No Miller will be presenting.
Just going to answer a question while the transition occurs. So 380 students.
At South.
At
So I have a
South.
couple of updates for folks, just
Okay.
as you were talking to Jean. So the numbers at North for guidance counselors, the ratio is about 177 to 180. The concern isn't so much the numbers as it is the need, not for school guidance counselors, as it is for school adjustment counselors to meet the complex needs. There was a recent survey of high school students where 30% of students who took the survey reported that when they wanted to meet with their counselors, there were no counselors available because they were all busy. So that's the need. There isn't so much about school counseling as it is about the clinical piece. So students needed to be seen, and they typically had to wait about a week to schedule it. And then the number that Anna just said is that at South, for students who are under enrolled, it's 380 students below 72 credits.
Wow.
And there is a question, I believe, Principal Strauss would have to answer this, is if we were fully enrolled at South, I'm not sure if the facility could hold all the students. So I'll leave that there. I'm
And
not
what that
sure.
means is students have privileges at different times. They're in and out of the open campus, just for families who are following along. We don't like kick students out and say, don't come to school at this time period. They actually have privileges and they come in and out at different times, older students. Right, and now for Office of Student Services.
Great. So I'll start off with a framing slide, which I did last year to remind the committee and folks listening that the Office of Student Services encompasses not just special education, but student support. So we coordinate for the entire district from NECP to postgraduate programming, which we have up until students are 22 years old, all the mental health services, school and guidance, counseling, social emotional learning. And then I believe that this was a question on Monday night about who owns MTSS, and the answer is we all do. So that's why that piece is there as well. The next 3 slides are really more enrollment slides. So these are the number of students we have on IEPs broken down by level. So you have that in front of you. I'm not going to go through it. The numbers are still tracking as high as they have been the last 2 years. I'll speak to this a little bit later in subsequent slides, but what concerns me more is the number of evaluation requests that we've been receiving. I think we are somewhere between 400 and 500 evaluations that we have completed thus far. Parents who are requesting evaluations to see if their students have an educational disability that qualifies them for special education services. So back to our conversation earlier with Jean about the need for MTSS, some of the numbers that I will present to you tonight, I think are actually a direct result, while not quantifiable, Paul, as you were asking for. I think these are some of the effects that we are seeing by not having universal tier 1 and 2 supports infrastructure. So if you think about 400 to 500 evaluations, each evaluator spends between 10 and 20 hours per evaluation. So this includes evaluating students, writing the reports, analyzing what it means, and then attending meetings to present on their findings. So these are the 3 slides that I'll sort of just gloss over quickly. I'll stop at the high school one quickly because I just want to review here that of the 89 students who are out of district at the high school level and post-secondary, 15 of them were placed this year thus far, which is pacing higher than we have seen in the past. Out of district placements, our superintendent noted that percentage-wise, we're still pretty low, but that's because we have invested so much in in-district programming. The needs are still there, but again, our numbers are still relatively low compared to other districts. What I have created for you this year that I hope is helpful is what I'm calling a heat map. So these are our pressure points. These are our pain points within the Office of Student Services. The first piece is we do have a bubble at NECP. We have 14 students graduating this year, moving up to kindergarten next year, all currently in Stride programming. 7 of them will go to Bowen, which is where you have seen our request to add a second classroom, second Stride classroom at Bowen. The other 7 will either go to Cabot or Zervis, depending on their home address. The second piece is an off feeder pattern issue that we are seeing. So all students who are in the Achieve program at Ainger, if they are to continue in the same program, they would go to Oak Hill. What we are seeing is that parents request for them to be back with their students, their cohort previous to joining Achieve at Ainger, and go to Brown. And in our earlier presentation, we talked about all of the students going to Brown. And you'll see I have a couple of bullets that, at least from the special education side too, and student services, I'm adding to the bubble at Brown. I guess is what I'm saying. So we have students who, instead of going to Oak Hill, are electing to go to Brown. And we still have to service them there based on their IEP, despite the fact that the programming and the staffing are at Oak Hill. The numbers of elementary stride programs going to Brown are high. What we would like to do is expand the programming to the north side. So Brown is pretty heavy right now in terms of need. The REACH program, and I do have a slide after this, just explaining the two programs a little bit better so folks can better understand the difference between the two programs. We do have students at most, if not all, of our elementary schools with this REACH profile. The superintendent talked about this earlier. Rising sixth and ninth graders for next school year don't look like what we have seen in the past. These are our students who were learning to read in either remotely, so DLA, or I mean, it was during COVID. So they didn't learn to read in the same way that students have been had they gone to school full time. And ninth graders. And so these are students who need to learn to read. So this is not specially designed instruction, but they are already qualifying for IEPs and they need to learn to read. This is a need that we have not yet seen, but it is coming up. This next piece, I bucketed it into mental health, but I want to share with you a couple of numbers so that you understand the heaviness that we are seeing at all of our schools. We are tracking as of February, and these are known, right? So reported to the schools, 50 hospitalizations in secondary. Fewer in elementary, but we're still seeing them in elementary, which again is new for us. Our stabilization team has been extremely busy. They are at capacity. They will obviously still see students, but they are seeing a need for more FTE there because of how many students who are in crisis.
Can you share what the stabilization team is, just for viewers who may be new to that?
Sure. So it exists only at our elementary level. And so we have Unit A and Unit C staff who have been trained in crisis management, de-escalation skills, and they are a traveling team of folks essentially who go into schools for students who are in crisis, who are often dysregulated, and they help to build the capacity of the existing staff in the classrooms in the schools. And they will generally come in, there's a period of destabilization that occurs, then there's training with the existing staff, working with the student and the family, if it makes sense to, if it's part of the student's profile. And then the main team leaves to do this elsewhere, but there are some staff who stay behind to ensure there's a more gradual release. And there is a question out there as to whether or not we should create a team like this for our middle school. And you'll see tonight, I'll add some data here too, some numbers that the middle school, we're seeing a lot of students in crisis at the middle school level. When we look at our numbers, most of our students who go out of district go out typically during the middle school years, and it's harder to get them back because they're experiencing success. And so while we are confident that we could educate them at our high schools, it would be hard to make the case to pull them out of a place where they are enjoying success, but at a cost to us, right? So a couple of things also to note, at the high schools, I think I mentioned this earlier, the demand for clinical services from students is outpacing what we have available in terms of staffing. We have, so our therapeutic day school, Central High School, and then our general education program that provides temporary relief for students at the high schools called Springboard are already at capacity. So last year, Central served 28 students total. This year, they're at 39. Springboard last year total served 24 students. This year, they're at 24. When I mention students who are in crisis, we break them up into sort of 4 general categories that we're seeing, mostly in secondary. The first category are students who are already outplaced and out of district placements who require even more restrictive placements, which is hard because it's not just our district that's seeing this. And so our out of district coordinator, Shannon Filipiak, is often trying to find placements for students who are already out who need a different placement. Then we have students who require hospitalizations. I mentioned last year, it's still the case that there are fewer seats than there are students who need hospitalizations. So they are either coming to school and they're not attending classes, they're non-attenders, so they're in the building, but they're not going to class, or they're not coming to school at all. And so for some, they're hitting that chronic absenteeism level. And then we have some students who don't require a hospitalization, but they're not attending school. So these are the four categories: out of district, students are hospitalized, students who don't require hospitalization, but they're not attenders, non-attenders, and then students who come to school, but they're not accessing classes. And I don't know the number, but it is concerning to all of my administrators. We meet every 2 weeks and we talk about it quite often. So I just want folks to understand that there's special education and then there's student services that covers students who are not in special ed, who may on paper look like they're doing really well academically. I mentioned parent requests are high, particularly at the preschool level and at the middle school level. And I should add, anecdotally, as we were pulling from some of the schools, only less than 50% of the students who have been requested by parents to receive evaluations qualify for special education. That number is important because I think that there's a tie there to students who they haven't gotten any interventions. So they don't have an educational disability, but they may be lagging academically or elsewhere because we haven't been able to provide them with the right interventions. Then this last of a pressure point for us is what we call stay put. It's actually a legal right of parents where if there is a signed IEP, parents can elect to stay put on the services that have been agreed to by them, even though the school is recommending something else. So an example would be a student who qualifies for occupational therapy in 3rd grade, who may no longer need it in 5th grade. A parent can say, I still want that though. We wouldn't write a new goal because we think that the student has achieved the goal and be on grade level for grade 5, but a parent can stay put on that, and we are required to provide 3rd grade level OT skills to that student in 5th grade, in 6th grade, in 7th grade. That's a parent's right. And in order for us to change that, we would have to go through a problem resolution process with the state. Then we have what I'm calling N of ones. These are parents, it's kind of the opposite thing where we recommend a program, a citywide program, and parents, it's their right, they decline that. So they may go to their feeder pattern school instead of a citywide program, and we still have to provide those services for that one student, for that profile, despite having a program that has a different program model. This next piece I mentioned is the difference between just giving a little bit more information on the Achieve program and the Reach program. The biggest difference for me, or not just for me, but when we look at the Achieve profile and the Reach profile, Achieve students, if we're looking at their cognitive test scores, typically score average or above average globally in all the areas that are tested. For students who would fit the Reach profile, we're looking at typically lower scores globally, and also in addition to a language-based learning disability, we're seeing communication impairments as well. So these students on their IEPs will have a lot more speech and language services attached. This next piece, again, I won't go into it, but I pulled from CPAC's end of year report that's been really helpful to me, which shows the disparate outcomes and performance for our students with disabilities compared to those without disabilities. Many of our students with disabilities also belong to historically marginalized subgroups. Chronic absenteeism rates are higher among students with disabilities than those without. And in our secondary schools, our students with disabilities are reporting higher rates of mental health challenges. So the YRBS connectedness survey and even the signs of suicide screening that we do at our schools. And I should mention for those I think I was asked this last year, so I wanted to make sure I have it this year. Between 3 and 8% of each of our students who we have permission to screen in the signs of suicide screening are screened in. So that means that they have shown some sign that they have had suicidal ideations. This is 3 to 8% per grade is what we're seeing, which is not, it's typical from what we see, but I would say that that's not good. I do want to say also at the strategic planning meetings, we have high school students on them, and they themselves mentioned that the signs of suicide has actually helped them. And some of them said even some of our friends. So that is something we need to continue to do. And then the last 3 bullets there is just to show that academically on MCAS, at least our students with disabilities are scoring lower than their non-disabled peers. So for this year, I met with all of our administrators for the most part and looked at what is it that we need. This is not the most aspirational budget. I will say that because I know that there is not endless amounts of money, but how do we begin to prioritize, right? So we're looking at how do we move the needle on providing more access for our students academically to general education curriculum? How do we meet current needs that we see? So the mental health challenges that I shared with you in an earlier slide, and then restoring some functions that were removed in 2 positions. There are actually in particular 2 Unit B positions that were removed right before my first year. So this would be Art Ferguson's role and Paula Black's role. Nonetheless, 2 administrators' positions who were cut from the Student Office of Student Services that myself and my team has picked up because the work still exists. So what are we proposing for next year that we'd like to see? Dedicated reading teachers who have special ed licenses at the secondary level. This is that bubble of incoming 6th and 9th graders. I've talked about this before, a short-term milieu programming at our high school. So these are students who whose education has been disrupted due to mental health challenges. A BRIGHT program is what I would like to bring in at each of our high schools. This would be a partnership with the Brookline Mental Health Center. A lot of Massachusetts districts and who we would consider our peer districts have BRIGHT programming in their high schools. BRIGHT stands for a Bridge for Resilient Youth in Transitioning. There is already a plan to reopen REACH programming at the elementary school, opening up a Second Stride classroom at Bowen. I would like to expand Stride programming to the north side, especially for those students who live in the north side, on the north side. Restoring Unit B oversight and coordination. Right now, I work with 2 of our psychologists to coordinate their professional development and their monthly meetings, but I can't get as deep as someone who had been assigned to them could or had been. Mental health and SEL programming and supports in secondary. Right now, we don't have that in terms of administrator oversight to help plan what folks are experiencing, and then to help streamline where we can and develop additional programming. I'd like to right size some of our related service providers. So adding partial FTEs. So psychology, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy. So an example is at NECP, we have a 0.95 school psychologist. She does all of our testing. I would like to add a 0.05 and make her a 1.0. She, I think, is at close to 200 evaluations this year already. Right now at our middle schools, our assistant principals for student services also serve as team specialists. So they run all the IEP meetings. At Bigelow, where you have a caseload of 60, that's probably doable. At Brown, where you have a caseload of close to, I think it's 150, that's tough. And given what is coming to Brown, that will be even tougher for her. I'd like to begin planning for a central middle school. Again, our middle schools, there's not as much mental health support as there should be, and programming, I should say, outside of our existing special ed programs. But again, our students who need these aren't all students in special ed. And then that should actually, oh, no, that's right. Elementary stabilization FTE. So Jesse Krodick, who you've seen here before, has requested an additional FTE simply because there is the need. So right now those folks are stretched among schools. So that's what we have proposed. And again, it restores and is needs-based, but certainly not the most aspirational. This here is a slide that you've seen in the budget book, but I pulled it out as it's student services salaries. I just wanted folks to take a look there. The 15.1 that you are seeing here, let me just make sure I have the right, okay, is just to Open Reach and Bowen. So these are the FTEs. Bless you, Tamika. This next piece, I'll just go in a little bit deeper because I want folks to really understand circuit breaker. It's the way that the state has structured it. So circuit breaker is a state special ed reimbursement program, and it really is to assist districts to offset some of the high special ed costs. And the way that it works is that circuit breaker will reimburse districts, all districts that provide special education services, at a predetermined amount. The state sets that amount at a predetermined rate. The state sets that rate. So this means that you have to spend a certain amount, which is called foundation, before you even qualify for circuit breaker funding. So this year or last year, foundation was $49,000. So the district has to put in per student $49,000 worth of IEP services in the service delivery grid before we would even be reimbursed. That reimbursement, the last, I think, 5 or 6 years has been at 75%. But in years before that, I think it was the last 5, he's not here, but I want to say the last 5 years it's been at 75%, but that's the highest. We don't know that. So we put all this information in late spring, early summer. We don't know what the rate is until close to fall. And the reimbursements come the next year. So planning for circuit breaker reimbursement is sometimes a little bit of a guess. And it's broken up. So it's lagging by a year in terms of the reimbursements, and then it's broken up by quarterly payments. So I hope that's helpful. I know that there was a question about, well, how would we pay for Reach and Stride? I actually, or how does it compare to out-of-district tuitions? I'm not sure that our students in Reach would actually even meet the $49,000 foundation amount. So if we send them out of district, it would cost us tuition plus transportation. And, you know, we could do the math. One Reach classroom would be X number of adults and salaries is the way that we would look at it to compare the cost. Stride students, I don't know how many, but they're the ones who have most of the BTs, the behavior techs, the specialized A's attached to them. And we know that their salaries are typically higher than $49,000. So they would qualify for circuit breaker reimbursement. But it's really most of our medically complicated students, Stride students, and then our out-of-district students who qualify for circuit breaker reimbursement. So I didn't list what we would, I listed instead the impacts without the proposed adds here. So I bucketed them in that way. I thought that it would be a little bit easier to think about. So the first thing is that we would see continued trends of discrepant academic performance, social emotional functioning, and access to general education curriculum and programming. We would add to out-of-district placements if we didn't open Reach or Stride. There would be unmet mental health needs across all levels. There would be an increase in special education referrals, we believe, if MTSS is not going to continue to build out. And then there's a decline in staff morale and potential burnout. Testing caseloads remain high. The increased needs of students I have been observing in our elementary special education classrooms, and our teachers are fantastic. I've never been in a district where our special educators are bring so much expertise, but they're planning for and delivering specially designed instruction and meeting complex mental health needs at the same time, because that one student is bringing all of that. And if you do that times 12, times 15, that gets heavy. And I do worry a little bit about also our team facilitators at our schools who are running all these meetings where students are found not eligible. So Jean had this slide up as well in terms of showing the amounts per area for a less than level service budget. You'll see here that student services, including special education, is at a $1.1 million, call it, I guess, a deficit if we were to open Stride and Reach. In terms of thinking about that for us, where we would make up for it in the budget, it's equal to about 11 or 12 FTEs. I was always taught that your budgets should reflect your values. So I would say I don't want to cut anything because special education is federally mandated. And I cannot, as a trained psychologist and a mom of kids in public school, I would not want to touch mental health supports, but I know the realities. And so I would look at, I mentioned this, I think, in the past, special educators that would increase caseloads. We know that, right? I just spoke with classroom teachers on Monday night. I would look at efficiencies in restructuring existing programs. And then I would look also at our aides, not ones that are assigned to IEPs, but those who are in programs, those who are in co-teaching classrooms. I don't know exactly what levels and how many. Obviously, if they are there one-to-one for students, then they're on an IEP, but maybe they're coming out of a program or something and attending a co-taught classroom. I would be shaking the trees. I don't know if that's the right metaphor. I'm not good with idioms and metaphors, but that's where I would look for the 11 to 12 FTEs or so.
Okay, thanks, Casey. Questions from the members? I know, I'm looking at you. I know Rajiv has questions for Casey.
A lot of eye contact.
Casey, for a second, I thought it was going to be, you nailed it. We have.
I was
nothing to
ready to
ask.
go home.
I was going to ask you if you know who won the Super Bowl.
You know, I almost congratulated you, and then I was like, I'm not going to throw down in case
Yeah,
we lose next
thanks.
year.
We
also.
have a little Chiefs Eagles thing so Rajiv, please go ahead.
So, looking at the numbers of students on IEPs, like the big green blocks from the presentation, right? What explains the big drop for this year at both NECP and elementary?
So these are numbers. So I should have said this, I'm sorry. So the numbers that you see in the 2 previous years are at the end of the year. So the numbers that you see for this year are as of right now.
Got it.
Does
Which explains NECP, because we
Yep.
have students coming in often from early intervention or other programs when they turn 3. But it's a really significant drop from 858 to 782 at the elementary level. That was just surprising, because we usually know they're feeding in from NECP or we have kind of a steady stream of people coming in because they've gone through the evaluation and been found eligible. But this is a drop of, almost 80 students across the district. So that's why it was surprising.
I would say there's a bunch of months and a bunch of kids in the queue to go. So they're being tested now. You said currently we have a pretty significant backlog, correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I don't know if I'm understanding your question, Rajiv, so forgive me. But at the end of the year last year, we had 858. As of March this year, we're at 782. You're saying, is it possible that we'll make up we'll
Right. So
qualify?
So last year, at the end of the year, we had 858 students on
Mhm.
IEPs at the elementary schools across the city.
Yeah.
Right? So this year, we've had more students come in at the K level.
Mhm.
We've had others who've moved on to middle school, so some coming in, some going out. And with that, I would expect the number to generally stay about stable. And then you'd be adding in students who are newly found eligible.
Mhm,
Right.
mhm.
So just thinking about those three movements, students coming in at K, students leaving and going into sixth grade, and then kind of newly eligible students, it seems like even where we are today is pretty low.
Mhm.
That's why I was
We
wondering.
do exit students out as well.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we can get you that number too of how many.
Right. And
Mhm.
I think anecdotally that's probably a smaller number, but yes.
Mhm.
So it just, again, it seemed like a significant number of students. The NECP one, yes, we have students coming in throughout the year and the team has to react fairly quickly
Yeah.
to when they come in.
Mhm.
Just was wondering on that because it kind of stuck out as a large and kind of difficult to understand difference.
Sure.
So that was one thing. The other thing, kind of coming back to the absolutely valid comment about we all own MTSS, right? Which we do, and I'd asked this of Aisha. The MTSS funding, which I would like to think about as kind of like, here's the big number, and if we want to maintain our momentum for MTSS, again, it's going to reflect our values as well as our financial thinking or stewardship of the ounce of prevention, being worth it. So it's hard to get a handle on collectively for MTSS, not special education programs or IEP related services. What numbers are we looking at? And so Anna, it's more like we have, here's what it would take to fund MTSS implementation overall as a whole.
Mhm.
How much are we proposing in this budget, and what does the lack of funding for MTSS implementation then imply? Not just in Casey's world, but kind of across everything. And I think that's an important number because we're partway through through putting things in place.
Mhm.
And they're kind of having those tier one services available this year and then not having them available next year
Mhm.
might actually cause things to slide
Mm,
backwards.
mhm. So you're asking for the Thrive budget vision for MTSS as a strand. That's what I'm hearing this evening.
I'm trying to understand that
Mhm.
across the district,
Mhm.
right? And Casey owns some of it, Jean owns some of it, Aisha owns some of it.
Mhm.
Like, what does that look like? And I'm not necessarily looking for anything tremendously accurate because I know that we kind of break things out and we don't have a clean head count. Someone could be spending 50% of their time providing tier one supports and 50% doing something else. Right.
So know that we will try to approximate that. We are in a mental health working group together, Casey and I, with our NTA partners, and we are actually trying to approximate that for our social, emotional, and mental health needs now. So I will pose that. We'll pose that question to our group about what would it look like. But I wanted you to know that will be a very aspirational view.
Right.
And we can certainly do that for academics as well with a case of proof, maybe with our 5 intervention teachers here and just sort of extrapolate from there.
Right. And again, kind of looking in terms of prioritization, academics is absolutely critical. But given if we like had an FTE available, like, would I place that against academics or mental health support? Like, I think that's a tough decision. We need that mental health support. Right? So anyway, further discussion.
Yeah,
I guess.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rajiv. Emily?
As always, thanks again, Casey, for the presentation. So I have two questions. First is about the Bright program.
Mhm.
Very, very happy to see that it's in this and that necessity, unfortunately, that's behind it. But I think it's a wonderful addition to the budget.
So it's not in the budget, Emily.
It's not in the budget.
It is a what's not funded in this budget.
Oh, I totally missed that.
Mhm.
I was so excited.
Mhm.
Never mind. Most of my questions were because the concept of the Brookline partnership, and I was wondering how much it would cost, although that in and of itself, I think if you have any high level information, obviously I'm not expecting it right now because it's just a line item of things that we're not doing.
Mhm. Is
But
your question how much?
yeah, just like what would the approximate cost would be? I have no idea. I mean, well, we probably haven't even talked to Brookline about what that might possibly, you have.
We have.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We've had
Very
multiple meetings. Yeah.
So I would be just interested in a little bit more of understanding what that might take to implement in Newton.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer that now?
If you have it.
I do.
That's great.
Yeah, so ideally, it would be 3 FTEs per school building. So an academic coordinator, this person would go to all the teachers of that one student, collect work, understand what needs to get done, bring it back to the student at the hub of where Bright would be. And then we have a clinician to service the student. And then we would have a teaching assistant or a Unit C person who would then help the student transition, assist the student with transitioning back into the larger school environment. Then to partner with Brookline Mental Health because they have the protocols, they have, they do this across the country. It's to get their sort of full package. So there's the dashboard, there's trainings and oversight. It's $7,500 per school. So $15,000, 6 FTE.
And for 2 high schools and also possibly into the middle schools or just the 2 high schools?
It's just for the 2 high schools. If we did the middle schools, I mean, we obviously have 4, we thought about this. 4 middle schools or 1 Bright program for 4 middle schools.
Okay.
And they serve between 3 and 5% of a school's population.
Okay, that was my next question, was how many students approximately would it be able to handle? I am so mad at myself because I got very excited there for a moment. So that's unfortunate. I guess my other question is for Liam, and it has to do with transportation reimbursements and just the uncertainty of special education transportation reimbursements and the Student Opportunity Act not in fact delivering what they promised that they would do, at least for transportation. I know you don't have an answer, but I just there's just a question in terms of risk and, what you put in the budget for that. I'm assuming that you did not assume a 75% reimbursement for
Esther.
transportation.
That's correct. Hi, good evening, everyone. Liam Hurley, Assistant Superintendent CFO. So we have an assumed 45% for transportation. The goal, we actually, and Casey and I were talking about this, we actually don't even find out. We submit our claims in July. In about September, October, we'll actually find out what those claims are. So we submit for all our tuitions and instructional costs for circuit breaker and transportation. What they've done is they filled the tuition bucket first, which we are budgeting 75%. They've been pretty good with that. Transportation has been kind of been left a little bit in the lurch. So we're not assuming that full reimbursement at this point yet.
Great. Those were my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Tamika, then Paul, then Barry.
Thank you. And thank you, Casey. Appreciate the effort that it takes to worst case scenario, reality check, and do a little snippet of what I wish would happen in a budget. And so I think this is yet another place where I'll call it the Gina, because it's just the prettiest picture of what we need to do and when we need to do it, and how much it's going to cost over time. I think.
Tamika likes Canva.
Yeah.
That's what we've learned.
Okay. So does Gina.
You're simpatico and that.
Okay.
But I do think that would be helpful, because, like Emily's showing her cards about being excited about the Bright program. I think that's something we would all be very excited about. And it's helpful to know when in your mind that would ideally come in and of the costs. You've given us a little bit of that now, but I'm sure you have a whole bunch of similar initiatives and related costs that you would like us to keep in mind over the next several years. If we turn to your heat map of items, I'm looking at the parent request for evaluations. right now you said that there's approximately 400 to 500 and evaluations, did I get that right? And
That have been
there's
completed.
20 hours, completed.
Mhm.
So not outstanding. Okay. That
Oh,
would be-
yeah. No, that would be, I'd be out of a job.
Yep. So that gets to my question, which is, what are the required timelines for completion of that process? Is there a requirement for that, and what are they?
Sure. So this is special education regulation. So there are 30 days to test and then an additional 15 to meet to determine eligibility.
And so given your current levels of staff, is it you're pushing up against those required timelines and you're skirting very close to being, having compliance issues?
Very
That
accurate.
one's- That one's a high priority, needs to be corrected.
It's a compliance issue.
That was my understanding. So another one of your heat map items was your N of ones. That was framed with the state put services. Those are parents who elect to have their students stay in their feeder schools as opposed to enroll in the separate programs, the specialized programs.
Yep.
So how many of those students are there in the district? Because you said that the services have to stay with the child. And so as a district, how many students are we talking about? Is that
I can get that for you. I would probably have to ask each building team facilitator because they're very aware of the student who, let's say, we recommended Stride, they're not at Stride. So I'll get that for you.
and the reasons, if you could give us a sense of the reasons that folks are declining those placements? Is it pretty much the cohort
Mm-hmm.
moving on with your cohorts and staying with the feeder school, or is there something else at play? I think those are just things that come to mind.
Yep.
And then my last question was, once the students are placed out of district, how difficult is it a process to entice the student to return in district, in your opinion?
I have seen, we do a pretty good job. There are, I was surprised, I should say, to see how many number of students we actually bring back for high school. That said, I can get you a percentage, let's say a typical year, but it is very difficult.
And so I guess that the situation that I'm trying to capture is that if we don't invest in some of the programs, the Reach and the Stride, and we do end up in a position where we're outplacing that, those cohorts of students, it seems as though it's not necessarily going to be in a year or 2 or 3 when you're able to open up those programs, you'd be able to bring those students back. It's not a foregone conclusion that that would be the case, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And we do have some experience in this, in that we could bring it to the Bureau of Special Ed Appeals, the case. And I mean, there's record of this, but hearing officers will look at whether or not the student is making progress in their out of district placement. Even if we have something exactly the same, they would not want to transition that student because.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, Tamika. Paul, then Barry.
Thanks. Thanks, Tamika. Those were really helpful questions. I'd like to go back to Rajiv's point, though, and generalize it a bit. I think in response to Emily's request, we have that chart that shows the departmental reductions that would be necessary to meet the 3.65% allocation budget. That provides a certain amount of information, but I don't think it provides us the information we need to evaluate trade-offs. It's looking at the school system vertically rather than horizontally, in the way Rajiv was presenting it, for example, with regard to MTSS. And it gives the impression of fairness because everybody would have to meet the same percentage bogey. But it's not clear that doing that best meets the overall priorities and objectives of the system as a whole. So, Chris, I guess I'd like to ask you and Anna and Emily perhaps to mull over this and whether for our next iteration of these discussions to move more in the direction that Rajiv was suggesting, which is to think about system-wide priorities, reductions, adjustments, and so on that would best meet our goals, rather than to look at it in that kind of departmental way. And I fully understand that doing that requires or would require more concessions from some departments than other departments, probably, although who knows how the numbers would work out. But I think our job is to look horizontally across the district and see how the priorities can best be met. So I just throw that out as an idea for you folks to think about it at the leadership level. But then, Casey, I had a specific question for you also. I really understand why out-of-district placement with regard to reach just doesn't make sense at any level, even if it's less expensive because of the transition issue you just talked about. I mean, as the children progress under reach, it's possible to move out of that program or to move to a different variant of a program within the classroom, within our classrooms. And so my question does not go to reach, but it does go to stride. Mm-hmm. As to again, we're facing tough budgetary priority issues. And if the cost of out of district care for the stride cohorts would be substantially less than building those programs within our buildings, should we consider doing that? And in asking that question, again, I'm not advocating for it. I'm just trying to understand it, understand the trade-offs. And in answering the question, I also understand that it's not just a matter of dollars and cents. There are other important factors that come into that decision. But could you take us a moment and just talk through how you would evaluate those two options for the stride clientele?
I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking, Paul. So how would I go about comparing the cost of running stride in-house versus students going out of district? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, in the instant case, we're proposing an expansion to Bowen of another classroom. An alternative would be not to do that, recognizing that we have a cohort of children coming through at that age level who need the appropriate services to meet the federal and state law. I mean, I'm not at all suggesting that we would ever not want to meet those requirements. But we face a choice of whether to do it in the school or whether to go out of district for that number of students. And I guess I'm asking you to help us think through why we would want to pick one option over the other.
Yeah, sure. And we talk about it from time to time too, as our numbers grow. One of the issues is that there are wait lists. There aren't that many schools that provide, who are A, state approved, and B, provide the services that we're looking for and have seats. So even if we're proposing out of district, there will be students who are on the wait list who we still need to educate in our buildings. So we will still need staff, maybe not, full-blown programs like we have, but we still need additional staff to service these students while they're waiting placement. The other piece too, and I think you spoke to this, is Newton is known for its commitment to inclusion, which is why, we build the programs that we have. And so to make a decision like that, meaning to begin to systematically send students out of district, I wouldn't want to do that lightly. So I'd like to take a little bit of time to think about how we would go about doing that. I would want to hear from stakeholders too, versus just me proposing a way forward with that.
Yeah, I think indeed that would be very prudent to do what you say. And we can talk at another time. I mean, we're not going to resolve that in this budget cycle in any event. But I'm raising the issue so that maybe we can think about it in the way you just suggested, a more thorough evaluation of that option, recognizing that it would be a change from at least the last few years' approach on this. So I guess we'll just leave that for another day. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And just as a reminder, we shared in our retreat some cost analysis of the comparison of outplacing Bowen and Stride and Reach. And the Bowen program with 8 students, annual tuition that could be outplaced for, on average, $147,000 per student, if they can get into a program, and if that is the price. And the way they forecast this is they do a range of the potential schools that a student could be outplaced into, and they create a composite number. So that number, for this purposes of illustrating it to you, is $147,886 per student times 8 students, for total tuition of $1.183 million for that, just the Bowen program. The circuit breaker threshold this coming year is $53,500. The remainder of that per student is $94,000. If we're reimbursed at 75%, that's $70,790. So the total tuition reimbursement we would receive for a $1.18 million cost would be $566,316. And so the total out-of-district cost would be $1.6 million, with a circuit breaker reimbursement of $738,000. So it's definitely not in this case more dollar efficient to outplace. And I think given the complexity of the out-of-district placement scenario now and what we're seeing with the wait lists, we believe we would pay while we wait, and then we would pay to place. So that was the conversation that we had as we tried to bring that to you about, and Chris asked us that question, could you please cost that out for us? Which then prompted a conversation about, let's look at all of them in the future. So just what you said, Paul. But of course, there's young people and investments in those now, right? So, but we will bring you that analysis just like this each time we discuss those types of programs.
Just a quick question. My understanding was that that analysis did not include transportation.
So we have that
Or-
as well. So out of district transportation, just as a barometer, and I'll just layer this into your question document so you can just look at it. But the out of district transportation for JSC, so just our December invoice is $283 per day for 2 students, or $141.50 a day at $25K per school year. So there are other costs, and then of course there's the variable of what will the tuition reimbursement, what will the transportation reimbursement be, and that's a roulette wheel that we play with each year.
Spinning and pointing to 45%.
Correct.
And then there's typically a 3 to 4% increase in tuitions every year, and hope that we never see a 14% increase again.
And right.
Just following up on that point, and we've had a little bit of this discussion, but the state reimburses through the circuit breaker mechanism for out-of-district tuition. If you provide those same services in-house, the state does not reimburse for the costs of that.
they would, we just have to meet foundation, which
So-
is harder.
So we do get circuit breaker reimbursement for instance, for our stride classrooms. Oh, I thought it was only out of district C.
I think when Liam did the
Come on
calculation.
back,
I will
Liam.
never figure out our circuit breaker and chapter 70 funding.
Oh, yeah, that's not me.
I just wanted to chime in. So we certainly, in-district costs are eligible. They're actually set at the state rates. They're not not the Newton rates. So they have formulas on the rates that they'll pay for paraprofessionals, for OTPTs, things like that. We can make that.
okay.
It's difficult for an in-districting program to exceed $53,000, but we claim those, but we're really not there at the same threshold. So typically out-of-district tuition meets that threshold much easier
Yeah.
than the in-district costs. But we do claim those costs, again, set at the state rates, and you have to, again, exceed that $53,000 rate.
And how are we able to allocate costs? So we have a $53,000 foundation threshold to meet before we get any reimbursement. We have a student with a one-on-one assigned aid in a classroom with special, suited to that purpose. And like, is it only the most direct variable cost? Are you allowed to allocate?
Yes, so the circuit breaker reimbursement claim form has per student, and the team, Casey's got Amanda Collins, kind of her finance manager, helping her for every student. We have if there's an assignment in their IEP for services, we look at the numbers of hours in the grids. They put in those actual costs that are assigned to those students. We put in the cost, but again, the state then assigns what their actual costs are, basically based on their formula, which are typically lower than ours.
But does the state allow like allocated costs?
I think they've got to be direct costs. We're trying to put in direct costs are based on hours.
Okay.
That we've got
right,
kind of
that's-
committed to each of these students and the services they're receiving.
That's helpful.
Thank you.
The one other wrinkle there, as Liam said, is we pay significantly better than
Yes.
the baseline
Than the
that the
state
state
rates.
allows.
Yep,
Right.
understood that. Barry and then Mayor Fuller.
Thanks. Okay, a few questions. Hopefully I documented them correctly and I'm going to remember them now. First one is, I think I understand this, but I just want to confirm what I heard. I saw on the slide that showed the number of IEP cases going down in the most recent year. Is that because there's a backlog and we just haven't gotten to them, or is there another reason?
Are you asking similar to what Rajiv was asking earlier?
Did he ask that? I'm sorry if I missed it.
I just want to make sure I understand your question. So the previous year's numbers are end of year numbers, and then the lower numbers for this year are as of March 10th.
Right. And so sorry if I missed it.
Okay.
Not
Yeah.
ideal being remote right now, but so you expect it to be somewhat similar.
We do. Yeah,
Okay.
we're trending similarly. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good. That answers that question. Sorry, I just need to get to where I wrote this. I'm trying to understand a little bit about the comment around kids from Achieve wanting to go to Brown. So Ainger feeds to Brown, right?
Non-achieve program, yes.
Right. Okay. And so people are opting to what they've made friends at Ainger and they just want to stick with them.
I think
I-
so. Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'm just a little bit confused because it then it makes me kind of wonder what is the makeup from the district that everyone's wanting to go to Brown. Like, do we have a breakdown of where students within the district are coming from? Because Brown is one of four schools that they could go to, and yeah, it's like the one that Angel feeds to, but it's also um I'm confused. So I'm not understanding why. I understand, but they're in this a separate program. So it makes me wonder if do you have the data on like where they're feeding, where they are from the district going into?
So I think we can get it. I don't have it right now. Speaking from the special ed side, I know that to your question about like, well, how come it's all happening at Brown? I think that it's been an accumulation of decisions that have made from previous feeder patterns to, Stride being there. There's focus, there's spark there. I don't know. I could find out the timeline for when each of the programs landed at Brown and why. One of the things that Maura Tynes, Melissa Gamble, and I have been doing in close communication with the superintendent and Liam is to correct the feeder patterns. So just like what you're trying to wrap your head around, which is
Yeah.
what the thing is like, why not fit the special education citywide program to have that match what the feeder pattern is for everybody?
Right.
But it's almost like a domino effect. So to make space at Brown, we need to create space in the north side to move the Oak Hill Achieve program into Brown to match.
Yeah, I am not agreeing with you because I understand what you're saying and not, but it's I'm agreeing because it's very confusing. But thank you. So if you can provide some more info on that, I'm just trying to wrap my head around that whole situation. Regarding Reach, how many kids are you planning that to be for the fall?
Yeah, so for the first year, we're looking at grades 4 and 5. There are 4 identified, but IEP meetings are happening, now every week. And so quite frankly, we're asking the elementary teams to hold off until we know where the budget.
Got it.
So at least there are 4 known students who we know would benefit and their IEP happen to have happened.
And okay, that makes sense. And then what do you have like an estimated percent that you think the program might grow over the years and the thought that it might be added to other like if it's being added at Lincoln Elliott, that might be added to another school or another classroom added at some point?
Adding another classroom or adding it to another school? So adding it to.
Well, yeah, I guess both.
Trying to grow it, right, at Lincoln Elliott.
Okay.
I don't think with the new builds, I'll have to get back to you in terms of what programs are planned for the new builds. But I don't think that there's reaches in the future with any other schools right now.
Okay, so it would just be growing it at Lincoln Elliott.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all from me.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Barry.
Barry. Mayor Fuller?
First of all, huge thanks to you and your
Thank you.
team. You do important and good and hard work. I have a feeling you probably can walk me through it tonight. It might be Monday. I tend to look, there's a chart that's always in the budget every year. This year it's on page 149. It's the FTE history, and it's goes back 5 or 6 years and then does the proposed, and it's a really high level one. So it's central staff, admin, supervision, instruction, student services, clerical. And here's the thing, there's an all aids category, and then there's custodial maintenance. And there's lots of that are in the category of aids, and I suspect that's what I don't understand well enough. And I know how important aids and paras are. Last year's book thought we would have like 507.3 aid FTEs. During the course of the year, that number goes up, and I think I probably understand why that happens. But it's another 12.8 actually happened during the course of the year. And then for next year, that's where all the big growth is in FTEs. It shows an additional 25 aides, 25.1 aides for FY '26. Liam may be here to help me. And that brings it to 25 full FTEs are aides. Somebody just walk me through, but the 25 aides don't line up with how we talk about adding FTEs, like when we heard from Aisha or Jean or Casey. So and
So
I'm
there's
sure it all is real. I just
Yeah.
can't follow
There's
the,
one simple one right out of the gate, and
Yeah.
that's the full day KAs, which are 15 of those 25.
oh, so that's
Those full day KAs are included in that 20, so in this 25.1. So I think it's
KAs.
15.2.
That helps a
are-
lot.
In addition to that, then are these programmatic aids for
Stride.
Reach and Stride.
And they're aides?
There are a combination of teachers, there's a few teachers, and there are paraprofessionals that are assigned
But
to the
there's like
students.
no teachers show up here. or like-
In terms of instruction, we've got a minus 6.8. Is that what
Yeah.
is that what you're looking
And
at?
that's the elementary
That's
class
kindergarten. Yeah,
sizes.
so it's a little
So
complicated.
it,
so we
they
have-
come in and out.
they
There's
come in and out.
positives and
That's right.
negatives. Got it. That's why.
Does that make sense? But the full
Actually,
day
you
KA
just
specific-
cleared probably almost all of it up for me.
Whoa. Way to go, Liam.
Thank you. Got it. I think I got it. Let me put, thank you. That was the question.
Okay.
Thanks.
So
Mhm.
one of the members also asked us to dive into our paras and say which are associated with programs, who's a one-to-one. So we are working on that right now so that it'll come to you. Just, it's not like we can make any reductions there. They're driven by IEPs, but there was a curiosity about what does that look like?
Thanks, Mayor Fuller. And Paul, just to your first point you made in terms of that pro rata distribution of the underfunded amount, just so you're aware, that wasn't any prescriptive thing that came from the administration. It was a question I had, which was, and I wholeheartedly agree with you that any type of reduction in service you'd look at, you do on a very holistic basis and do it in a minimizing way. It was simply as a thought exercise of, if you took the underfunded amount and distributed it based on budget, what would that look like, just to get the wheels turning of, where would you have to make hard decisions? So not prescriptive in any way whatsoever.
No, I got that. Thanks. And I think it was very helpful to have. Thanks.
Any other questions for Casey? Okay, well, thank you very much, Casey.
Nice work.
Better luck next year in
We'll get there.
the game. Yeah.
Everyone watching at home, he means football, not in special ed or student services.
Yes. Yes, Tamika.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to insert into, I suspect that we'll be getting an update regarding the issue of the under-enrolled students, which is something we spent a good amount of time on tonight. But I think a way to flesh out the picture of that for me would be to get a sense of, by 12th grade, what number of students in as 12th graders are essentially carbo loading or trying to make up the difference. That would indicate for me that there's an earlier problem of getting up to that threshold number of credits each year. If not, there's something else going on where the kids are just there's something else. So be sure to look at that and consider that as well. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Fuller, you had something else?
It's it's for Monday. It's not tonight, but can I just put something? I suspect this is for Liam. Maybe it's their superintendent, but
got
I
a list,
suspect
so
it's Liam.
Hit me.
And I think it's just clarifying because I just don't know enough. We have a budget before us, the 297.5 and the 2,199.6. Help me on Monday just understand federal and state and other grants that I think are on top of the new 297.5 million, I think. And I think the 2,199 FTEs there's others on top of that too. Just help me understand it. In part so that I think all of us are sensitive and nervous about might there be loss of federal and or state and or grant aid in the coming years, and what might we have to backfill, and are there people associated? I can find in here most of the federal and state, but it doesn't really match up with the offset. And I don't know what's in the
Sure.
operating budget. Just,
Let me
and
see if
it's
I can,
not for
yeah,
tonight.
I'll try and do that for Monday night. So
Yeah.
the big grant that we have, and we've made a change a couple of years ago, the big grant that we have that were
The
people on it
IDA.
is called the special education IDA grant. That's almost $3.7 million.
I can
And
see
that
those
had
people.
paraprofessionals, which
Right.
are an allowable expense to put those if they're direct, special education expenditures on them. We actually have now a little different process where we have them in our budget. We want to show them
Yep.
and we do a transfer a couple of times a year. We still have to do what are called time and effort certifications of our staff to be able to qualify for that, to be in
Yep.
the
I saw
in the
that
budget. There are some other
asterisk.
grants though, and I'll try and get some pieces on that. And there's some grants and some revolving accounts that we do have. So for example, the METCO program has probably nine or 10 people on that METCO grant, not funded in our operating budget. So these are operating budget FTEs. So let me see if I can kind of get a breakdown of other non-operating budget pieces. The big one was the SPED IDA grant. In that one, we've got those staff in there, but those staff are offset basically
Yeah.
by that special education IDA grant. So if that IDA grant, which we're being told potentially maybe either level funded, that's potentially the latest, that would have a serious consequence. That would have a big, impact on us if that was reduced or somehow, goes away.
And I just want to correct
And-
that METCO is 16 FTEs, 7 in the general education and 9-ish that are just METCO staff.
That's right. So that's the teacher credit. That's correct.
And would the 9 be part of our 2,199, or are they in addition?
So the 9 staff would be in addition. So they're not in this
So,
operating budget.
Yeah, if
See
you
if I
can
can.
just
Got it.
walk us through.
Where do staff live? How are they
How
funded?
many are there FTEs and how many
Mhm.
non-federal, state or grant programs are on
Mm-hmm.
top of the 297? Because this, as a school committee member, we seem to focus certainly on, I'll call in city lingo, it'd be the operating budget, the 297. But how many more dollars are there? And it does.
Fair.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, we did take everyone out of Title 1, 2, 3, 4 who was grant funded, and anyone who is on a grant also assumes the cost of their benefits within the grant. So we'll get you all that.
Thank
So
you.
you know. So I just want to recap, if I could. We have the para analysis that we just talked about. We have the mayor's request there on grant use and FTEs. We have, I hope I get it all, under enrollment by grade level, particularly those who might be credit loading at the other end by both high schools. The MTSS 5 teacher impact of what our last year impact of the 5 interventionists that we were able to implement. We have how many more teachers would be needed for full student schedules at both high schools. We have how many school adjustment counselors would we need in order to impact need at the high schools. the ratio of counselors at North and South, or did we cover that tonight? We covered it. Okay. Ooh, we're done one. Middle school counselor ratios. How long would we need high school positions before the enrollment drop off predicted would mean that we would not need the implementation of the staff we put in last year? 46 fewer students at North. Can that mean a reduction or a deployment of some sort? Why or why not? The stride bow and out places versus in placement analysis. I actually just put that in the budget document for everyone so they can see we already did that math for you. So that one's done. Number of kids in elementary seemed lower. We just want to make sure we're on trend with the number of evaluations that are pending. And then some sort of development of an overall cost for MTSS by level. And a cut list by level and MTSS, but it seems that there's an appetite for, don't tell us about departmental cuts, which I actually love to hear. Tell us by theme. So safety, special ed services, mental health, MTSS, data-driven decision-making, and high-quality curriculum and instruction. It sounds like you'd prefer to hear impacts across the things we care about rather than in departments. We'll give that a whirl. That's a little more complicated. Well, you heard it here by the departmental, what we would have to reduce. So that's going to take me a little longer than Monday. So I just need all of this. So I just need a little time to get with the team. And who feeds to achieve from where and what that feeder pattern all is with diagrams and instructional videos. No, I'm kidding. And who are the ends of one, who, the number, and why, the percent of kids we get back from out of district in a year. Bright program, how much, what could we do? And the cost was discussed. Are we good with that? Okay. And that I think is everything that we talked about tonight.
Can I just add one thing and I didn't check the documents today, but also the factors of the budget that I had asked before.
Yeah, that will be added, correct, Liam? Okay. So there's a certain worksheet that Emily loves. It's called the factors of the budget, and it's going in because we love it too.
Okay. Well, I hope you have no plans over the coming week. Just so everyone is aware, our next meeting on the budget will be Monday at 6:30. That will be our final presentations, which will focus on business operations, transportation, human resources, basically our non-instructional areas, information technology. And as I said earlier, the public hearing will be Wednesday at 6 o'clock. I said 6:30 earlier, 6 o'clock. And then we will see where we are at that point in time.
Shameless plug, but Friday evening is the Newton Schools Foundation Trivia Bee, where the two central office teams named Thrive Hive 1 and Thrive Hive 2 will kick the rear ends of every other team in the city. See you there.
Bring it.
Okay. With
Head to head with school committee.
With Thrive Hive 1 and 2, we are adjourned.